Welcome back to Press Review with me, Carmen Cracknell. Today, as usual, we'll take a look at developments around Syria and also take a look at Egypt's upcoming referendum as we are joined by Dr. Wafiq Mustafa. But first, let's take a look at the front pages here in the UK. The Guardian leads its front page reporting that the government's flagship programme to shake up the benefit system is facing fresh problems in a battle between two departments at the heart of the scheme. The paper also reports on a branch of the Ministry of Defence funding postgraduate research into the culture of computer hackers, crowd behaviour at music festival and football matches. The Independent leads its front page reporting that the number of children seeking help for racist bullying increased sharply last year as campaigners warn that the heated public debate about immigration is souring race relations in the classroom. The paper also reports that the government buried key evidence in the run-up to a major U-turn on minimum pricing for alcohol. The Daily Telegraph leads its front page reporting that half of sex attackers are spared jail as the government is accused of failing victims by handing down community sentences for serious crimes such as child abuse, manslaughter and robbery. The paper also reports on ministers and senior government officials held dozens of meetings with drinks industry before reversing plans to introduce minimum alcohol pricing. The Times leads its front page reporting that thousands of men with prostate cancer will be advised to avoid immediate treatment in a significant rethink of care for the disease. The paper also reports that 4 US military personnel are believed to be dead after a helicopter crashed on the Norfolk coast last night, and features a picture of the Pope after a well-wisher places a lamb around him during a visit to a church on the outskirts of Rome. Now let's take a look at the top stories in the Middle East. As Egypt's referendum approaches in just under a week, and with Muslim Brotherhood-linked cleric Yusuf al-Qaradawi forbidding voting in the referendum, let's take a look at what is in today's press about Egypt. Adnan Abu Amer writes in Al Monitor, taking a look at Egypt's relationship with Hamas in his article Hamas-Egypt ties hit new low. Amir says relations between Hamas and Egypt have reached unprecedented levels of tension since the movement was founded more than 26 years ago. Hamas has been on the receiving end of continued accusations by Egyptian media personalities. Egyptian Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim's declaration last week, however, constitutes a leap in finger-pointing at Hamas, accusing the Palestinian group of carrying out armed operations on Egyptian territory and training members of the Muslim Brotherhood to use weapons and manufacture explosives. Amer says accusations from Egypt did not stop there. Another Egyptian official told Al Monitor in a phone conversation, labelling the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organisation has left Hamas two choices: split from or join it in its classification as a terrorist group, since it organisationally belongs to it. Amer adds that a senior Hamas official denied to Al Monitor the latest accusations from Egypt, asking Cairo to cease what it referred to as offences. The movement regards these accusations as dangerous indications that serve to delude the Egyptian people and distract them from the truth and scale of the crisis being endured by the ruling regime. It also claims Egypt is trying to place the blame for an internal crisis on external forces. Amer points out that the spiralling tension has dampened hopes of a thaw in relations. One Hamas official told Al Monitor, Egypt's official discourse is close to painting the Hamas movement as a full-fledged state that is manipulating Egyptian politics and claiming everything that is happening on Egyptian territory is caused by Gaza. Ali Ibrahim writes an opinion section piece for the Saudi newspaper Al-Sharq Al-Awsat titled The Abla Fahita Distraction, in which he takes a look at a Muppet-style character who regularly appears on Egyptian television named Abla Fahita. Ibrahim says Abla Fahita burst onto the political scene last week, and local Egyptian and foreign media found her to be a perfect target for coverage. Media outlets were fascinated by the puppet, which has had accusations of inciting terrorism thrown at it. A complaint has been lodged with Egypt's Prosecutor General against a Vodafone ad featuring Abla Fahita, which it is claimed is being used to transmit secret terrorist messages. According to Egyptian law, the Prosecutor General is compelled to investigate any complaint, regardless of how frivolous it may be. Ibrahim adds that the media can, of course, be excused for its interest in this story, which combines suspense and humour, and thus one would think would be equally of interest to the general public. But no sooner had the story emerged than it vanished once people came to realise it had not warranted this level of coverage. According to Ibrahim, many largely imaginative stories that have no basis in fact have been circulating in the media recently. It is wrong to preoccupy the public with such rumours, which only distract from the real issues and create a social climate of distrust and scepticism. In fact, Egyptian society today reminds me of the well-known Arabic proverb, "He whose tongue is burned by hot soup blows even on yogurt," i.e. once bitten, twice shy. Ibrahim adds that promoting scepticism and searching for hidden conspiracies is unhealthy for the collective consciousness because it diverts attention away from what is important, promoting the political process and achieving a roadmap to end the transition. The political and media elite must be responsible for focusing and directing the public's attention towards important issues, thus improving political discourse for all concerned. He concludes by saying that achieving the first step of the roadmap by holding the forthcoming referendum on the draft constitution will create a new momentum, particularly if there is a high voter turnout. This will create a climate of trust and hope in the society's ability to overcome any future difficulties. The only solution is for the roadmap to be pushed forward and finalised, because standing still would be tantamount to suicide. Amr Moussa, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs for Egypt and Secretary-General of the Arab League and Egypt's 50-member committee head, the committee drafting the new constitution, writes an opinion piece in the International New York Times titled "Blueprint for a New Egypt." Moussa says since the revolution of 2011, Egyptians have engaged in almost continuous debate over a critical question: what sort of country do we want? This past December, I delivered an answer. We believe that this new charter, shaped over months of discussion and many drafts, reflects the needs and aspirations of all Egyptians, regardless of religious affiliation, gender, race, political views, or economic status. Moussa points out that the 2012 constitution was rushed through by a single dominating political faction and answered only to its priorities. The 1971 constitution failed to guarantee vital liberties. In short, both previous constitutions failed because they denied Egyptians the dignity and freedom they deserve and demand. Both those constitutions have been popularly disavowed. Moussa adds that among other measures, this draft charter gives Parliament, for the first time in Egypt's history, the power to impeach the president, not just for criminal acts but also for violations of the constitution. Unlike the 1971 charter, it also ensures a separation of powers and limits the elected president to 2 4-year terms. This draft version also criminalises torture and human trafficking, protects women from violence and commits the state to achieving equality between men and women. Moussa believes that constructing democratic institutions and political infrastructure cannot be done overnight. Many countries over several centuries have embarked on similar journeys, and there are few examples of such momentous change occurring with rapidity and ease. He adds that Egypt is still near the beginning of a crucial period in its storied history, and yet I am confident that we will emerge from this tumultuous transition stronger than before because we are willing to unite to create the political structures necessary for stability, prosperity, and democracy to endure for generations. Moussa concludes saying that next week Egyptians will have the opportunity to vote on the constitution in the referendum. I know the people of Egypt will embrace this moment, and I hope the world will as well. For a nation so infused with its past, Egypt is ready to move forward. Joining us today to talk about the upcoming referendum in Egypt is Dr. Wafiq Mustafa, Chairman of the Conservative Arab Network. Thank you for joining today, Dr. Mustafa. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? We seem to be experiencing a small technical difficulty. We'll get back to Dr. Mustafa later. Now let's continue with our coverage of the Middle East. As usual on the show, let's take a look at opinions regarding Syria. Semeh Ediz has written an article for Al Monitor titled "Erdogan under pressure as Syrian crisis spreads to Iraq." Ediz writes, a highly risky situation is emerging for Turkey on its eastern borders as developments in northern Syria continue to deteriorate in favour of al-Qaeda-related groups that are also trying to make headway in Iraq's strategic Anbar province. Although Turkey insists it remains opposed to any settlement that keeps Assad in place, Ediz writes, concern is nevertheless increasing among Turkish security and intelligence officials over the advances in Syria and Iraq by al-Qaeda-affiliated groups, particularly the ISIS, whose name reflects its ambitions. Ediz adds, Erdogan, of course, has hardly any influence left in the region that could alter the situation according to his expectations or desires. Other remarks by him in Tokyo also suggest that he's still not prepared to come to terms with the situation developing on the ground. Ediz also adds Riyadh is reportedly behind the group of moderate Salafists operating under the banner of the Islamic Front, which is also fighting al-Qaeda elements in Syria and, according to media claims, also receiving support from Turkey and Qatar for this. Although Saudi Arabia and Turkey may be on the same page regarding Syria, Aziz adds, it is clear that Riyadh's primary concern is to keep Iran at bay, even if this comes at the cost of settling for a failed state ruled by Sunni extremists rather than an Iran-friendly regime in Syria. Regarding Western involvement in the Syria crisis, Ediz writes, Washington and London stopped all aid to the Syrian opposition in early December when fighters attached to the Islamic Front seized a depot full of weapons belonging to the FSA. The incident demonstrated that any lethal equipment provided to the FSA could easily fall into the hands of radical elements. Ediz concludes all of this is a far cry from Ankara's initial expectations for Syria. Rather than being a game setter, as it once hoped, Ankara is being led by events today. Meanwhile, there is an increasing possibility that Iran will participate in Geneva too, especially after US Secretary of State John Kerry's green light for it. An article in the Syria Times features the headline, "The Syrian people alone to decide in a popular referendum." The article says that in a press conference on Tuesday, Syrian Minister of Information Amran Zaoubi added that Syria wants Geneva II to succeed and would never allow any non-Syrian agenda to pass through the meeting, be it Saudi, Turkish, French, US or whatever. The minister hoped that Geneva II would be a prelude to political process leading to national Syrian political solutions. Al-Zaoubi is quoted as saying, any work in Geneva should be agreed upon by the Syrian people in a public referendum. If not, any work in Geneva is meaningless and void. According to the article, the minister blasted the Saudi support to terrorism, asserting that the possessing of money and financial resources in no way should mean the killing of others, and condemned the recent explosions in Russia, Iraq and Lebanon, asserting that one side stands behind these explosions and should be held accountable. The article further adds that Al-Zaoubi called on Turkey and Jordan's governments to stop their backing and support to terrorists, and added that Iran had its value and political weight in the region, and Syria does wish its participation in Geneva too. The Independent has an article by Kashmira Ganda titled UN to Stop Updating Death Toll in Syria Conflict regarding conflicting death tolls from the conflict. The article says it can no longer verify the sources of information that led to its last count of at least 100,000 people dead in late July last year. The article adds, Rupert Colville, a spokesperson for the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, said that the organisation lacked feet on the ground in the country and that it was unable to verify source material from those with access. Ganda added Colville also said the UN could not endorse counts put forward by other bodies, including the widely quoted figures from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, whose latest tally is more than 130,000. According to the article, the head of an al-Qaeda-linked rebel group in Syria called for a ceasefire between opposition forces who have clashed for 5 days in the most violent infighting since the civil war began. The leader of the Nusra Front also said in a recording that ISIS group is to blame for the bloodshed, adding that although it is not possible to verify the authenticity of the audio statement, It was posted on a Twitter account used by the Nusra Front. Now let's take a look at the top headlines from international papers. The International New York Times leads its front page with the headline, "Conflicts Reshape Mid-East Alliances." China's Global Times leads its front page with the headline, "Tributes Pour In for HK Media Tycoon." UAE's Gulf News leads its front page with the headline, "Iraqi forces deploy for Fallujah strike." And finally, Turkey's Hurriyet Daily News leads its front page with the headline, "Graph probe spills over amid new police purge." For more updates, please visit levant.tv. That's all we have time for today. Please join us tomorrow for another press review. Goodbye for now.